day 174 of the Trump administration, and the president is airborne right now en route to Paris. And with this traveling White House, not all the baggage is in the cargo hold. As the Associated Press puts it tonight, this president heads overseas trailing questions. The latest round coming from the revelation that his eldest son was eager to welcome Russian help in the campaign to elect Donald Trump and defeat Hillary Clinton. Quoting from the AP, in private, Trump has raged against the latest Russia development, with most of his ire directed at the media, not his son. While staffers have grown accustomed to a good news cycle being overshadowed by the Russia investigations, Trump aides and outside advisors privately acknowledged that this week's developments felt more serious. From Politico, there's this. One Trump advisor said the White House is essentially helpless because the conduct happened during an anything-goes campaign that had few rules. In a pre-departure interview with Reuters today, the president defended his son, Don Jr., saying, quote, "I think many people would have held that meeting." Yesterday, he called his eldest son, quote, "a high-quality person." The president today also talked about his own meeting at the G20 in Germany with Vladimir Putin. He told Reuters he spent at least 20 minutes asking Putin about Russia's election hacks. Quoting the president, "I said, 'Did you do it?' And he said, 'No, I did not. Absolutely not.' I then asked him a second time in a totally different way. He said, 'Absolutely not.'" On the suggestion his campaign colluded with Russia, he said, quote, "It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." In the president's other interview of the day with Pat Robertson of the Christian Broadcasting Network, he suggested there was no way Putin wanted him to win the 2016 election.
If Hillary had won, our military would be decimated. Our energy would be much more expensive. That's what Putin doesn't like about me. And that's why I say, why would he want me? Because from day one, I wanted a strong military. He doesn't want to see that. And from day one, I want fracking and everything else to get energy prices low and to create tremendous energy. He doesn't want that. He would like Hillary, where she wants to have windmills. Okay? He would much rather have that. There are many things that I do that are the exact opposite of what he would want. So when I keep hearing about that he would have rather had Trump, I think probably not.
In fact, the president told Reuters he had one regret about an omission when he sat down to meet with Putin. Quote, "It's really the one question I wish I would have asked Putin. Were you actually supporting me?" Also today at the White House, they continued to support Don Jr.'s contention that his father didn't know about that Russian meeting in Trump Tower last June. They contend he only learned about it recently. But in the face of that, there's this. Donald Trump speaking on June 7th, the very same day his son agreed to the Russia meeting.
I am going to give a major speech on probably Monday of next week. And we're going to be discussing all of the things that have taken place with the Clintons. I think you're going to find it very informative and very, very interesting.
Trump did give a major speech on that Monday, focusing instead on national security. Let's, at this point, bring in tonight's starting panel, 4 of our veterans on this broadcast. Philip Rucker, White House bureau chief for The Washington Post. Jeremy Peters, political reporter for The New York Times. Shannon Pettypiece, White House correspondent for Bloomberg. And Michael Crowley, senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico. Mr. Rucker, you contributed to a piece in The Washington Post tonight by Abby Phillip. The headline, "A Million Miles an Hour Inside Trump's Campaign When Trump Jr. Met with Russian Lawyer." Because it's still the story, because it has changed the direction and scope of the investigation, and it's still germane, take us back as a result of your reporting. What was going on at that time, that week, that day?
Yeah, so this was a really critical moment in the campaign. It was as the primaries were transitioning into the general election. Donald Trump had become effectively the Republican nominee, but he had not yet secured the nomination. There was all this talk about a delegate fight at the upcoming convention, but he was behind Hillary Clinton in the polls. He was getting hit by her. He was underfunded. He didn't have the political organization in place. He didn't have any kind of a research team in place. And so his campaign was desperate for any advantage espionage that they could seize against Hillary Clinton. And that is one of the reasons people who worked on the campaign explained why Don Jr. was so eager to take that meeting to potentially get some opposition research about Hillary Clinton, even if it came from the Russian government.
And Michael, you did some important writing this week that got a good long ride for you about Donald Trump Jr. And the takeaway was his love of all things Russia and especially all things Moscow.
Yeah, Brian, we've spent a lot of time in the last many months talking about President Donald Trump's relationship with Russia and his handful of trips there. But actually, when you zero in on Donald Jr., he's the one who's been to Russia nearly 10 times. By my count, I think I was able to establish 8 or 9 trips based on his public remarks over the years and even his social media. There are some great tweets from a trip he took in 2011 where he's bragging about buzzing the treetops outside Moscow, flying under radar in closed airspace. Who knows what that was about? He didn't explain. And you find quotes from him saying, for instance, that Moscow might be his favorite city in the entire world. He's going over there again and again, looking for business to find revenues for the Trump organization and clearly developed this affinity for the place. He even tweeted about how St. Basil's Cathedral on Red Square was his favorite landmark there, and he never missed a chance to see it when he was in the city. So this guy had a kind of relationship with the city, and clearly people in it and Russians who saw him, I think, as someone they could speak to, someone they could approach. It made him a natural target, if you will, Brian, for outreach like this.
And Jeremy, about the president, you heard the man. He asked Putin not once but twice, and yet as president, he's not willing to be as unequivocal as the defense intelligence agencies.
That's exactly right. I think the White House had a tremendous credibility problem going into this week, and in its denials, if they didn't mean much before the New York Times started reporting on this meeting with Donald Trump Jr., they mean almost nothing now. It's a problem because in order to believe that Donald Trump knew nothing about this meeting, you kind of have to disregard everything we know about the dynamics of the Trump family, how close they are, and how closely Trump relies on the counsel of the people who have been with him the longest. And it's also to kind of defies belief because you would have to believe that Donald Trump Jr., who felt this meeting was so important that he included Paul Manafort, the campaign manager, and Jared Kushner, the senior advisor, in it in the first place, didn't believe that it was important enough to tell his father about. So I think there are a lot of questions, and they all kind of culminate with whether or not you can trust Donald Trump at his word when he says something didn't happen, when his word has been proven wrong time and time again.
And Shannon, for your part, you've written about what this story has done in terms of a hit to the president's clout.
Right, and I feel like I've written this story a number of times now. Just when you think his credibility or his standing with members of Congress couldn't go any lower, there's another scandal, and I'm back to this story of how the president is losing any sort of political capital, any leverage he had in Congress to get things done on the big issues that people voted for him on their health care being too expensive, on not having good jobs, on worried about paying for their kids' college. The reason that people who voted for him put him in this White House, those efforts are being harmed by this constant scandal machine, this constant distraction that they create themselves for not being transparent or making misleading statements. The West Wing only has so much bandwidth, and they only have so much political capital. And each month that goes by, each negative story, they spend more and more and more of that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.